Hi.
Hello.
So today we have a guest, and her name is Kitty. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Kitty. I live now in London. Lived in the Netherlands for 5 years. I trained as a classical singer. I also have done a coaching training. I'm a certified coach, and I'm currently studying performance science at the Royal College of Music in London. So I do a little bit of coaching, facilitation. I teach at a conservatoire, and I also mentor students in the master program at that same conservatoire. So yeah, bit of this, bit of that, very much in the musician, performer, health and well-being space.
Awesome. That sounds really exciting. And I find I really enjoy doing lots of kind of different things. So it's nice that you get to also like perform and have opportunities to teach and go into the wellness side of things too.
Yeah, I think keeps you on your toes, definitely, and keeps things
Yeah.
interesting as well.
Yeah.
How did you get into the wellness side of things?
I guess it started during COVID, as it happened for a lot of people. That's a similar thing. But I did a course on positive psychology during the first COVID lockdown, and yeah, I started to realize that this kind of psychological training was not introduced to me during my undergrad studies, and that there are so many things within positive psychology that were relevant to development and mental training, and that was kind of the first step. And I thought, there's something here, there's an opening. And then, yeah, I did the coach. I decided to take the step and to become a certified coach about 3 years ago now. I did my training, and yeah, I just kind of realized that there was quite a large level of like modeled behavior within, especially within the classical music industry. Like this is like lots of shoulds and things that are kind of implicitly shown to you and that don't take the whole person standing in front of you, and it takes the tradition of the past and tries to mold you to that rather than molding the future like to you. So yeah, I guess that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And like, Siwan and we both come from classical backgrounds as well. And like, it's kind of a joke, but it's also just that underlying all the time guilt of, I should practice that never goes away and that wears on
No.
you over time. And I mean, that's just one of many examples of a should that's placed
It's
on
draining.
musicians. Yeah. And maybe you could talk about one of the main transitions that you've gone through as a musician person in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two main ones. I've already kind of alluded to one of them. The one is kind of going from someone who was thinking, I only want like the classic thing of, oh, I'm a singer and I only want to make my money by singing, and then realizing, oh, actually, one of my strengths is in facilitation and holding space for people, and like allowing people to experience change, which was what made me do the coaching training, and kind of making that transition from the person who I was before to then the person who has coaching involved in her life. That was a big transition. And then the other transition, I was like, there is another transition that is happening or has happened. And then I realized, I was like, I'm in one now. Like I'm in a big one now. So yeah, the first one was, yeah, I guess around 3 years ago, and starting to open myself up to the idea of being a coach as well as being a singer. And it was quite a big like one of these moments where it just kind of shook everything up in what I thought I had known, and then what I wanted to be finding out. Also because I didn't know very many people who do that kind of thing. Over time, like I found and met people, more and more people who are in that kind of dual space, like not just teaching music and performing, and very much in the kind of music education space, but also in a kind of facilitation and coaching as well as performing. And during that time, especially during the coaching training, one of the things I was trying to work out most was I don't have someone to follow, or I don't have someone who kind of guide or mentor to show me how to do these things, which a lot of the time in music, you have rough guides. It might not be exactly what you want to do, but you're kind of shown a little bit certain pathways. And I realized, oh, I have to create this path for myself. And it was so scary because it also tapped into a lot of like my life stories, and being the younger sibling and always kind of having followed in the footsteps. Okay, what's my brother doing? And like having a guide in my brother, and the way that I'm like treated by my family as the younger sibling. That kind of plays in. You realize that you have these scripts written for yourself on, oh, I'm this kind of person, therefore I should act this way. And when you come against a kind of turning point that challenges what you've previously known, and you realize in order to achieve what you want to professionally, personally, you have to let go of that script. It's really scary, and that was a big challenge for me when I was starting training. And also like how are people within the industry going to view me, because sometimes I'm aware that I can ruffle feathers a bit in like traditional ways of how education is and how teaching is, and that was quite a big thing that I had to overcome to learn, and I'm still learning. The kind of letting go of the people-pleasing element that I think is present in a lot of musical training, in that you're people-pleasing musically, in that you're trying to appeal to people, and then when you step into a kind of coaching role, you're challenging people. So it's quite a big difference in mindset, and I definitely notice in myself a difference in even how I think and how I approach certain situations now compared to before I was coaching.
How do you overcome some of the people-pleasing aspects? It's hard. I mean, I'm like this.
It's hard, yeah. I think a big element of it is actually something my dad has said to me a lot. No one is more invested in your career than you are. That was a big thing that opened up a lot of thoughts for me around, I have to own what I do. I think another thing is, you know what you want and you know who you are, and being able to step into that is so empowering. And living by the people-pleasing way it takes away so much of your own autonomy on your life, and actually stepping into what you're good at. And I remember actually, I think it was like Rachel Willis Sorensen, the opera singer, who said once, like, when you try to please everyone, actually you're pleasing no one.
Mm-hmm.
And that really stuck with me, even though so I have like a lot of things about the classical singing world really get on my nerves. But that was something that really stuck with me. And yeah, I guess just kind of owning who you are, because if you are you're constantly trying to show people different, like the side of yourself that you think that they want to see, you're never going to be actually demonstrating who you are. It's like a version of yourself that is filtered so that, or based on your perception of their perception of you, and it gets very messy. And so it becomes much more simple to just understand, okay, this is me, and this is what I'm good at, and this is what I am maybe less good at, and to take pride in that, and to know that, like, if you really do get on someone's nerves, and if you're really not pleasing someone, you would hope that they would tell you, and then you can deal with that. But knowing how to communicate with yourself and with others, I think, is a really big part of like getting over people pleasing, but also knowing your boundaries and knowing like what is acceptable for you, and where are my own personal limits, but also where are my limits for how other people are treating me. Like, I'm not always going to be jumping through hoops just based on what people want me to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to actually finding the courses to take for like mentoring and wellness in classical music, how did you find those courses? And were they online at that point?
So the training that I did for coaching was not musician specific, which I think was actually a really, really helpful thing for me to get a very broad overview, and actually to realize that these kinds of topics are cross profession, that everyone is experiencing some level of it. I think in things like sport and in performance, artistic performance, that there is a heightened level of expectation and pressure. But it was really good to have like a general overview of like some psychological theories and change theories. And then now, of course, I'm doing something that's much more focused on musical performance and performance psychology. So that was a general one, and then it was quite nice because then I could kind of adapt the information that I was learning towards the profession that I wanted to aim it towards. And that was really interesting to start seeing in like more general psychological theories how things play out within the musical world. That's really interesting. But then there are also things that I've done, like I did a acceptance and commitment training for music performance anxiety course, which I found through the Voice Centre, which I think is a UK, I don't know, I think it might be, or maybe it's US organization, and they send out a load of different courses around, a lot of it is around vocal health or vocal pedagogy. There's some stuff around performance psychology, but yeah, I think it's Voice Centre is the name of it that I got that information from. And other than that, like, there's not a lot of like accredited or kind of certified courses specifically for musicians, or specifically for performers. A lot of it is a kind of general training that you then apply based on that, which I find really interesting. But I also think that there could be more of a like continued professional development atmosphere within the classical world. I think it happens like in the US, it happens more, that there is that. I don't know about Canada, but I know in the UK and Europe, like there's really not a kind of culture of like workshops and attending kind of professional development things once you've graduated, which I have experienced in that. Like I put on workshops, and it takes so much persuading for people to come to them.
Yeah,
So
because I don't know, C1, would you agree? Like, I feel like I don't know if I've really done much, but I know that these kinds of programs exist and are very, like people get pretty excited about them in Canada, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. So why do you think that people are so hesitant to join something like that?
I think it has to do with trust, and not looking enough at the kind of longer term benefits. I think people get put off by having to pay for things. I think that there's not really this culture of kind of collective knowledge sharing, and like I think it's really a European thing where it's like, okay, once you're out in the professional world, you're on your own. Like that gets told to us so much. And one of the things I'm trying to do a lot is to be like, hello, you're not on your own. Like there are many people here to support you, because when you're on your own, it's so lonely. And if you're thinking all the time, oh, I have to do this on my own and I don't know how to, like, I don't have meet people who are like-minded, and I'm doing loads of auditions and it's very lonely. I think it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. And actually, when there is more knowledge sharing and more like speaking up, there's more safety within the workspace, even if it's a digital workspace, or if it's a kind of virtual community, or if it's like a real life community of people who you see at auditions or who you see in concerts. Having this kind of more level playing field, which I think can be created by things like group coaching or workshops and things like that. So yeah, it can be difficult to help people understand that actually by attending these things, you get a sense of reflection and understanding of yourself, and to know that some of the best work happens when you put the instrument down. So
yeah, definitely. And it's a great way to also meet people and network and share ideas together, both within the music world and outside of that too.
And to explore thoughts about the industry. I mean, we all have like conflicting and contradictory thoughts about the industry that we're in, and that's fine. Like you can be passionate about what you do but still find things difficult. It's like in a relationship with somebody. Like you can have a long-term partner but still find things extremely annoying about them. That doesn't mean you don't love them or you're not committed to them. It's just that there are things that need to be worked out, talked about, communicated and understood between the two of you. So yeah, I often think about my relationship to the music industry as like a long-term relationship, like with a partner. Like what would I do in that situation with a partner, and like how can I do that in the situation that I'm in with the music industry?
What are a few things that you find irritating about the industry, and have you found ways to, I guess, circumvent those?
Oh, good question. I think there is a really heavy weight on tradition. And I think that weight can weigh down a lot of people. Like, I don't think it's a bad thing to be performing pieces from however many hundreds of years ago. But I think when there is like dogma attached to how things should be done, I think that's when we get into difficult conversations around elitism or accessibility or whatever it might be. I think there is a massive problem of sexism and misogyny that are so covert, and and power in general, power, like abuse of power dynamics and powerful positions. Like even in the last few years, like there was a conservatory in the Netherlands which had a really big case of like sexual misconduct of a teacher on students, and there was some conservatoires in the UK as well that also had similar cases. I think we have to challenge those systems, and we have to make the feminism massively comes into how we should be understanding the relationships within the conservatoire, because a lot of the time teachers who are there, they might be great performers, and they might have had a great teaching career, but they don't always understand the social boundaries or understand how to create psychological safety within those kinds of environments. I guess, yeah, how do I circumvent these things? I have a group in the Netherlands. We have a collective called the Still I Rise Collective, and every International Women's Day we do a concert based on, like this year we around protest and empowerment. So understanding how, like, to use music as a form of protest against gender inequality and gender violence, but also how we can feel empowered by what we do, and stories of empowerment. So yeah, taking action in that sense, trying to be a force for change, which can be difficult and challenging. Yeah, I think those are the two main things that for me weigh me down in this world.
I think so. You were going to tell us about your current transition that you're going through.
Yeah, so yeah, I moved back to England, my home country, in July, and that was quite a big decision in itself. But since I left the Netherlands, I've been really noticing a change in how I want to approach the more performing side of my life. So before, I was always doing classical repertoire for like 5 years, purely classical repertoire. Actually longer than that, like since I finished school, so nearly 10 years ago. And then last International Women's Day, we did our concert and I sang a piece of musical theatre. And I started to realize that I really missed this side of me, that I am not just in the box of classical singer and that's the only way that I can sing, that I had denied myself this other side of my musical personality, which is non-classical singing, musical theatre style, like also more kind of like pop and jazz style. And I always thought like, oh, it's my dirty little secret or something. But actually it's a strength that I have, that I can go between the two, the different styles and genres that not all classical singers can do, and that's fine. But I started off singing with big bands, and that was how I then got into classical music. So there's a sort of sense of reclaiming my younger self again, and how I got into singing in doing that. But my God, is it scary? I think that's the kind of theme with transition, is that transition is always scary because you're kind of shedding layers of yourself, and with this kind of fresh, new, soft skin that feels much more like permeable. So that's really what I feel at the moment, and trying to work out ways of developing myself as a singer in a way that won't be like harmful for myself, in a way that I feel safe to kind of expose myself in that way, and to just try different things and be open to being a beginner again, I guess. And I'm not a beginner singer by any means, but to have that mindset of beginner's mind, that is really helpful in just testing the waters and playing and kind of igniting a bit of a spark, rather than, again, the kind of shoulds of this is how you should be as a singer. And I think I was hearing from a friend, actually, of someone in an opera studio in a young artist program in Amsterdam, and that she seems like a really, on the surface, she seems like a very accomplished singer, but she's also having a kind of identity crisis around what kind of style should I be singing. I really like singing jazz, but I have lots of opera gigs, and I start to realize this is affecting a lot more people than we think, and that a lot of people have a desire, especially classical musicians, have a desire to expand the genres that they're performing and that they have been trained in, but there's often this feeling, I can't, because this is what I've learned, and we've lost the way of learning, which is by doing. Like, we think we have to have had a formal education in certain ways of doing things, and it's a very Western way of learning music, rather than the kind of more oral tradition, or learning through doing with others, knowledge exchange, again, this kind of sharing of information. And I notice in myself that I have a lot of these things. Also, like, what will all of the people who know me as a classical singer, what will my teacher think? What will my colleagues think? That I want to do something slightly different. And it is the weight of the kind of expectation on your shoulders. And I'm in the midst of that, and in that sense, I don't know where it's going to take me, and I don't always know how to deal with it. I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back from singing in general just over the last couple of months, just because I need to work out how I need to go back in again. And that feels quite nice. In some ways, it feels nice to take that expectation off my shoulders and to work out how I want to rebuild my like creative and performing practice.
And it's like you're doing it on your terms now.
Yeah, and I think I definitely think so, because I think before there was a lot of I'm doing this, and I can remember it so clearly, even thinking I'm doing this because it's what people expect of me. That is not a reason why you should go through, like, why you should be making music, is because it's what people expect of you. It's because it should be what you love and that it brings you joy. And funnily enough, we forget to think about what brings you joy when we're professional musicians.
I think it was Jesse Norman who said that pigeonholes are only comfortable for pigeons. And you're
right.
Still think of that quote.
Yeah, that's so true. And like, pigeons can be pigeons, like, but humans are a lot more complicated and complex and need a bit more, ironically, more wings, which is what pigeons have that we don't.
So was your reason moving back to your hometown, was it for the purpose of exploring these vocal opportunities, or is that just kind of something that is happening alongside that?
I mean, to be honest, the reason why I moved back here, so I moved back to London, and I've never lived in London before, which also comes with great anxiety and worry and cost. But yeah, so moving here has been like a brand new experience. I love it in many ways. It's nerve-wracking in other ways. You become aware of how many other people doing as singers or as coaches that there are. It's humbling in that sense. The main reason, it wasn't really like, oh, I'm moving back to do this. I just started to have this sense in me that, again, this is actually something that I wouldn't have noticed before training as a coach, or the kind of being able to listen to what your body is telling you, like what you want, that's not necessarily cognitive yet. But I started to get this sense of, I think it's time to close the Netherlands chapter. So that was like nearly a year ago. And then when I was starting to think about that, I remembered the performance science course at the Royal College of Music, which I'd been aware of for quite a few years. And I thought, okay, this is a good opportunity to kind of have that as an anchor. I do it part-time, so I only do it 1 day a week. And it just, then I signed up for the master, I got accepted, and then I've been kind of looking for work. Here I have a few bits that I still do with the Netherlands, like with companies in the Netherlands. I've had a couple of singing things here, but not very many, and I'm very much like in job hunting process as well. And yeah, that can mean that's been nerve-wracking, but I knew coming back that I didn't want to pursue like a purely classical music life, because it just feels less and less authentic to me. And my like coaching business is called Authentic Artistry, so being authentic to myself is something that I feel not only obliged to do, but yeah, I think about authentic artistry a lot. Like, what does authentic artistry mean to me, and what does it mean to other people? Because my belief is that everyone has their own version of authentic artistry, because we're all different people with different tastes and likes and interests. And one of the things I love doing is exploring that with people, and exploring how they can bring that into their life, into their professions. And so thinking about authenticity for myself, I knew that it didn't include an only classical singing approach.
A lot of the things that you've said recently, I very much relate to that. Like, I just moved to Germany from Canada, never traveled abroad like that before, and I also came here to do music with like, I'd taken kind of a break previously, and same thing, like I knew I didn't want to just do classical at this point. I knew that if I wanted a different result, I was gonna have to do something different. And so a lot of the things that you just said very much ring true to me, so that it's good to hear, really.
It's so true, isn't it? Like, I think a lot of the time when we know that we need change, we forget that if we want change, we actually have to change the input that is going into our everyday life. And that is so scary.
It's
and
very
especially moving
scary.
to a new country.
Yeah. And the whole thing with like shedding the skin, and like that skin underneath is very sensitive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel that. That's good though. And it's important. Like, you have to shed the old skin to create a stronger new skin, right?
What have you found that's helped you since moving?
Talking to everyone. Right, C1, all the phone
Yep.
calls, and yeah, so I
Yeah.
feel like just staying connected with my people, and like my people back home, all the amazing people that I've met here, like just staying in touch with everything. That's what's really helped me.
Nice.
Yeah. Cool.
So I'm wondering, how do you think we should work at bringing the joy back into classical music or music in general, or how do you personally bring back that joy for yourself and for the people that you coach?
I think, like, in most basic terms, where does joy come from? Joy comes from play, and we play instruments, but we lose the play a lot. And I think there's this maybe an idea that when you're a serious professional musician, it's difficult to play. And I really would like to go against that and bring back the play. So one of the things I like to do with clients, with students, so in my elective, I teach an elective in the conservatory in the Netherlands based on authentic artistry and finding authentic artistry, and a lot of it is to do with, okay, what do you value, what are your strengths, what makes you you, and enhancing the positive experiences that you've had, and then trying to recreate them in some way, not necessarily recreate them, but use them as a way of creating new joyful experiences. And something that I've found to be really, really effective is, so in one of the lessons we look at values, and then we talk about how these values relate to our music making. And I often offer my own thoughts as to how some of the values that they've identified could show up. And then later in the course, when we do practical activities, I ask them to play first. So they'll play a piece, an extract, and then I start to kind of question them about, okay, what went well, and what do you feel that you need to do more of in order to feel more comfortable. But one of the things that I often ask is, okay, so you identified this value. So one of them might be bravery, that they value bravery in their life in general. That might be in a musical context or in a non-musical context. And I say to them, how might you play this if you were channeling bravery? And what that does is not only asks them to take their focus away from technique and the kind of rigidity of playing things right, but it also asks them to tap into themselves and their artistic desires and their artistic identity. And it's so interesting, the result, because it's in front of the rest of the class. And I work in a way of, like, I don't only want people to play something for the result of the audience liking it more, but also so that they feel more comfortable in their own skin whilst playing or singing. And more often than not, this kind of approach brings really positive results, and it just gets people thinking of different ways of approaching performance rather than having to stay inside the lines. It gives them the freedom to play and to express and to explore and experiment. And I think that's what performance should be about, and not to be about whether you did things right or wrong, because that's where we get stuck.
And that's a great way to build connection with the people around you too.
Oh, massively.
Like on a personal level, right?
Yeah, I think, like, one of the things that I think lacks sometimes is that connection, like especially in like conservatory contexts. There's there's so much competition and there's so little connection.
Mhm.
And connection is the thing that actually drives our meaning and the meaning of what we do. So yeah, you're so right.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I really value about the school where I am now, is that I feel like there is some amount of connection. I feel like my peers are there to support me, my teachers are there to support me, and it's a very positive environment. And I feel like I'm allowed to make those mistakes and I'm allowed to grow into myself, and that it's okay if I haven't quite figured out everything yet.
That's so special and actually quite rare, I think.
Mhm.
Where are you? Which school are you at?
I'm at Western University in London, Ontario.
Okay, cool. Nice.
So I guess we want to jump into the next part. What do you think is going to be your next major transition in your life as a musician?
I think it's not necessarily strictly as a musician. Well, there are some things that I think will be, like, one of the things that I really want to do more of is improvisation. It scares the hell out of me. But then when it's something like that, when it scares me so much, I think, "Oh, it's going to be worth doing probably." And I think I will learn a lot about my voice and its capabilities. But I think it will, yeah, cause a lot of anxiety first.
Yeah, and
But
I
yeah,
actually think a lot of classical musicians, and I know I am no exception to this, I think a lot of classical musicians were so scared of improvisation because it means making mistakes and making really weird sounds that we're told like we're not supposed to, and that's tricky. So yeah, it's really hard to break that
I think
out.
we're also just so used to being given a blueprint of what we're supposed to do that we feel lost without that.
But I see more and more musicians of our generation craving that creativity that improvisation gives. And I don't know if it's something, if there is a kind of cultural thought or cultural kind of movement around our generation and wanting to kind of reclaim that space. But it's, I don't know, it doesn't seem like a coincidence that our generation is starting to see that necessity especially in the world of classical music. So yeah, that's really interesting to me. And I was just going to say another thing, so that was a musical one, but I think a future transition for me, which I hope comes soon, is to be more in decision-making processes around like conservatoire health and well-being, to kind of be in those spaces where you're advising in how things are. Like I would love that to happen at the end of my master, and I think that will also be really challenging because I think I'll be coming up to talk with people who are older than me, and often the kind of fresh young perspective is quite challenging for some people in different generations. But I think it's one that, especially within like conservatoires and music education, it needs to be at the front and center of how curriculums are and how teachers are with their students in the future.
Yeah, and like really reframe the system from the ground up.
Yeah, it's a big job.
Yeah, that would be amazing though. Like I would imagine the kind of fulfillment that would come out of having a position like that.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't speak for Brooklyn, but I think that the work that you're doing is really cool and very, very necessary.
Thank you. It's very nice to hear that. And yeah, also really nice to connect with both of you. And
yeah, nice to meet
faces
you.
to names. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really, really cool. Yeah, like really, thank you so much. Thank you for reaching out. like all your thoughts were just spot on. Like, you know, both Siwan and I were like nodding the whole time, like really, really important stuff.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
Great.
This has been wonderful. And to our viewers, if you like this conversation, then follow the Culture Rewrite YouTube page and check us out on Facebook and Instagram.